Continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. At the same time, pray also for us that God may open to us a door for the word to declare the mystery of Christ, on account of which I'm in prison, that I may make it clear which is how I ought to speak. Walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of your time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. This morning we're looking at Colossians chapter 4, passage that was just read to you. You're welcome to open up and have that ready and available. But having read that, I'd like to ask you a question. One that you reflect on. I'll give you a couple of moments. I'll let it get a little awkward. What's God doing in your life? What is God doing in your life? There are some of you who are going to answer that question, and there are a variety of answers, because our God is awesome. And we all need specific, wonderful, and different things. Some of you may have answered that question. I've been praying to overcome a temptation. It's one that I've been failing, and I know I've been failing at it. And I've started to see a little progress. And I've started to see a little patience, and I've started to see a little perseverance or steadfastness or whatever sin you're trying to overcome, whatever thing it is that's bothering you. You've started to see, I was victorious yesterday or the day before. I could see God helping. Some of you may have answered, well, there's news that I didn't want to bring before the church because this congregation is very private about its medical needs and concerns, some families. I don't want to bother the church with it. But I received good news on a test, or I overcame a thing, or now I'm taking less blood pressure medicine, or whatever. And you thank God for that. I can see God working in my life. He's helped me maintain my diet, or my exercise, or my whatever. Some of you may have said, I look more like Jesus today than I did yesterday. Thank God for that. There's a problematic answer, though, and that is, and I'm not saying it's a sin or that it's drastically wrong or anything, but there may be a problematic answer that is, I'm just not sure. I don't know what God's doing in my life specifically. You know what? Sometimes that's because God's ways are higher than our ways. And while we may have a fair, strong, or a decent prayer life, we just don't know what is I can't put my finger on something that I can tell God has helped to here do this thing. And so while you're thinking about what's God doing in my life, I want to hold that question and let it run throughout the rest of our time together this morning. Colossians chapter 4, verse 2. First of all, verse 1, a man divided the Bible into chapters and verses. The previous verse 1, belongs with the previous thought. This is the beginning of a new thought in verse 2. And that thought starts, continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. The first part of this is to be steadfast in prayer. It's to have a prayerful mindset. In 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 17, it's stated like this, pray without ceasing. Does it mean that you are always praying? How would you preach if you were always praying? How would you evangelize? How would you work and earn money to be a good steward to your family if you are always in the middle of what we consider a prayer? And the mindset, though, is what is being spoken towards. Are you having a mindset that God is always with you? And I love to phrase it like, if Mama was always with you, would you say some of the things that you say? I couldn't. My mama gets embarrassed too easy for one, and I like my teeth in my mouth for two. But if God were standing with you, if He sat right over here in this pew, would you fall asleep during the worship service? Would you not sing maybe louder? I want Him to hear me. Would you not pray more fervently? Would you show up more often? But continuing steadfastly in prayer is the mindset of God and I are in this together. It's He and I against the world. And He has blessed me with a wife. So He I and my wife and my children and my family and my brothers and sisters. It's us against the powers of Satan. And God is always with me. That's that mindset. Continue steadfastly in prayer. And be watchful with thanksgiving. That's where our exercise started at the beginning of the message. What's God doing in my life? If I'm praying for a thing, I need to watch for the thing to happen. Maybe God's answer is, you know what, it's not time right now. You need to keep that job that you've got. Or maybe you need to keep not having a job so that you can learn to rely on me, whatever his reasons may be. But the steadfastly watching here, the being watchful with thanksgiving is, I may not get the answer I want, but I know that God has my best interests in mind, and that he cares for me. And that whatever his answer is, whether it's to give me the things that I think I need, or whether it's to deny me the things that are going to be bad for me, even though I think I need them, I'll trust him. I'll pray to him about it. I'll work toward the ends that I think are best and in line with his will, but I'll trust him to say, Trey, you're too dumb to have that. You can't handle it responsibly. And to keep me from it. But one of those things, and specifically where Paul is taking this, is toward my evangelism. This month we are going to be looking at evangelism again, because that's the theme of the year. Go into all the world making disciples, teaching them to observe the things that I've commanded you, baptizing them. So our evangelism, again, we look at this month. Are you prayerful in your evangelism? The next verse goes, at the same time, pray also for us that God may open to us a door for the word to declare the mystery of Christ on account of which I'm in prison. All right. Here is a controversial conversation. I need you to have it with me. Jot down notes and tell me where I'm wrong. I hope you have difficulty with that. But it's something that I think we should critically think about. We're told about 150 times in the New Testament to pray. Be prayerful, be in prayer of. The word is used in some different situations as well, that they were praying. So we're given an example. Stuff like that. 150 times. A handful of those times, it's about health and travel. All of the other ones are about our spiritual well-being, overcoming temptation, restoring someone, or bringing people to Christ. I don't know what the percentage is. I'm just thinking right off the top of my head. 5 out of 150. 5-ish, depending on how you read certain scriptures. Does that mean that we should not pray for health? Absolutely not. If you have a brother in Christ, sister in Christ who is ill, absolutely you should pray for them. We're told that we do that. We're told that certain disciples prayed for other disciples. If you're traveling, we have Paul himself, I pray to come to you. But those are so limited in comparison with, I pray for your steadfastness. I pray for your strength. We just covered in Sunday morning Bible class a couple of weeks ago that after they were beaten and flogged, the disciples came together and they talked about the persecution. And they were told, you will not speak in Jesus' name. And they prayed for boldness. And the place where they were at was shaken. The amount of times we see are encouraged to pray for our physical well-being, and it's permitted and it's not wrong. But if that's the focus of our prayer life, then the only time that we hit our knees is whenever we're sick or going somewhere. Or whenever we're praying for someone else who is sick or going somewhere. We're missing out on what the majority of our prayers are supposed to be about. In the place that we are in Colossians, specifically, praying for other people to receive the Word of God, that the door may be open. And that's something we're encouraged to do in 2 Timothy 2 or 1 Timothy 2. Pray for all people, that it may bring about peace. Peace primarily with God. The majority of our prayer life should be about faith or spiritual qualities and accomplishing God's plan. And if we're not praying in those directions, maybe it's no wonder we're not seeing the results or seeing God do something in our lives. Are we only praying about earthly things? God brings about healthy things and tragedies so that He can get His plan across. It says throughout the Old Testament, I brought devastation, pestilence, toil, the sword. I brought all these bad things to you on purpose. Why? Because your spiritual life needed to be fixed. If you want to see more results of God working in your life, pray for more godly things. Pray for His plan to be enacted by you, seen by others, as we've just sang about. Pray for the door to be open. Paul gives us a clear example that we should probably pray more often for evangelism. So here's a question. And I just want you to think about it, no accusation. There is how often you pray to be able to evangelize. And it may be something like you're in the supermarket, you want to speak to the clerk and tell them, or the cashier, and say, I want to tell them about Jesus. Give me the strength to tell them about Jesus. Okay, that's one thing. That's terrific. Do that. But have you asked someone else to help you with that? Have you asked, call your preacher? And the answer is 0. And this is why we're having part of this lesson. Call your preacher and say, I want to evangelize to so-and-so or to someone. Will you pray for me to have an open door so that somebody will, so that God will give me an opportunity so that I can teach someone the gospel? At the same time, pray also for us that God may open us a door for the word to declare the mystery of Christ, on account of which I am in prison. Will you pray for me to have an open door to teach someone the gospel? That's Paul's request here. Can we say the same? Will I pray for you? Will you ask people, help me find places where I can teach the gospel? Paul gives us a clear example that we should pray more often and for our evangelism. And by the way, this is contrary to his health and to his freedom, ability to move. He says, on account of which I'm in prison. Not a notorious place for having the highest and most upstanding healthcare system, the prison of the old world. Freedom to move. Can you pray that I get to my destination safely? If you're in prison, your destination is from wall over here to wall over yonder, and that's it. A lot of the ways that some of the ways that these prisons were constructed were that a rod would go through from all of the cells, or along one long wall, and you'd just be chained to a rod. Wouldn't be able to go anywhere. Contrary to his health and his freedom, Paul is asking, let me find a way to preach the gospel. This almost seems counterintuitive. How many people will Paul get to interact with if he's in prison? Not nearly as many as we may on a daily basis, unless you're blessed enough to be retired. He says the purpose of this is so that I may make it clear. Long before the White House correspondent overtook this statement, let me be clear about it, which is how I ought to speak. One really, really good reason, and it's a biblical example, one really good reason that you may be worried about talking to someone about salvation is a problem with you. Not a problem as in you're inadequate, but maybe a problem as in you're inadequate. Moses has said the same thing. 5 times God says, I want you to go to Pharaoh and bring my people salvation from their bondage. Not eternal, but temporal. I want you to go to Pharaoh. And Moses said, no, you don't want me. He goes through 5 excuses about why he should not be. I can't do it. I don't have power. I'm not eloquent. You should choose someone else. We have biblical example of God should ask someone else to bring salvation to people. At the end of those 5 excuses, God gets mad at Moses. Why? Because God's already told him, I'm going to take care of the encounter. You just got to show up. Show up, and I'll do all the work. I will help you. Does that mean Moses is supposed to be silent? Absolutely not. But what it does mean is that he will give his servant good success. You can make excuses, and it's okay to reflect on yourself and say, these are places where I'm adequate, and these are places where I have room for improvement. But if we always make excuses and never actually do anything, then we are failing to uphold the statement that we're told when Jesus prepares to leave this earth. Go make disciples. Or are we saying, God, send somebody else? It's a good question. It's worth answering to ourselves. Paul says it right here. Paul. Does Paul have a decent resume? Who wrote most of the New Testament? Words that you are living by, words that I'm bringing you today. That I may be clear, which is how I ought to speak. Why may he say something like that? Peter says Paul is complicated. He uses complicated big words. He phrases things. Paul has sentences that take up entire lines in your Bible. One sentence with like 18 clauses. He's a lawyer-ish. His manner of speaking is lawyer-ish. And what Paul says is, I need to be able to make it clear. A man that I grew up going to church with, and I didn't understand very much until I got older, and I got a much deeper appreciation for who he was. One of the elders of Wakulla now, James Allen, was terrified to death to stand in front of people and present anything, even to pray. It wasn't his bag, not what he was called to do. But if you got in his truck, you weren't getting out of it without knowing that he loved God and he cared about what you thought about God. That was his forte. That was his place to teach. That was a place where he felt comfortable, where he didn't have a problem talking with you about it. And after all, it was his truck. He'd probably kick you out. No, he wouldn't. But it was a place where he was comfortable having that discussion. There are places where you are more comfortable than in others. If I ask you to come up here and speak from this pulpit, some of you would melt under the seat. But if I was texting back and forth with you, you're bold enough to ask questions that you'd never even ask face to face. Okay, that may be your place. That may be a place where your ministry can thrive. Some of you are good on the phone. Some of you are awesome in cards and in letters. Some of you, I've known some women that if you would let them cook, you stand over there, don't get in the kitchen. But if you'll stand outside the kitchen and let them cook, they will teach you the best Bible lesson you have ever heard. Ask for biscuits. Where can you thrive in giving the gospel? Where can you make it clear? It's okay to pray. I need help with this. We're told in James chapter 1, verse 5, that if we ask wisdom of God, he will give it to us generously. We're never going to be able to answer all of the questions. You can't. I can't. Jesus could. I want to be like him, but I ain't him. So I can give you as many answers as I can, and as many of them as correct as possible, but I can't answer everything. God knows that. That's why he wrote it down for you. We're only going to be able to give so many excuses for not evangelizing. Put away your excuses and tell somebody that they have a Savior who died for them. Sometimes you just need to hear it in a certain way. Stop making excuses. We need people to fill up these pews. You need to tell somebody about Jesus. You need to show them why you're excited, why Sunday's the best day of the week, why you care about your brothers and sisters, why it is that you take time out of your day to pray, to worship, to understand more about God's Word. Quit making excuses if that's what you're doing. For a wide open door for effective work. The open door that Paul is asking for is opportunity to give the gospel to someone else. It's used throughout the New Testament. Here, specifically, the first two are specifically Paul. 1 Corinthians 16:9, a wide open door for effective work. In 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 12 and 13, when I came to Troas to preach the gospel of Christ, even though a door was opened for me in the Lord, the point that he's making here is, I came to preach and there was a door that was open. I was given a place where I could make God more well known, where I could bring salvation to these people. In Acts 14, verse 27, when they arrived and gathered the church together, they declared all God had done with them and how he had opened a door of faith to the Gentiles. Here, what God has given them, this open door that he provided, was so that they could work with the Gentiles. They could accomplish his plan. What Paul's asking for in Colossians chapter 4 is that he is given an open pathway, an avenue, some kind of opening. What does that look like? Well, you'll have to judge that. You're the one who's in the encounter. I gave you one a couple of weeks ago, and Zach has not failed to every time he walks through the door. Zach comes up, hey, what's the good news? He goes, Jesus! He can get it. Can we? That's awesome. I actually wrote about it in an update letter I had to give last month, how encouraging that is. Who's listening? You don't ever know who's listening, who's keeping up. Who do you think is opening these doors? Do you trust him? Here in Acts chapter 14, verse 27, when they arrived, they gathered the church together, they declared all that God had done. How he had opened a door. Do you trust him? Is God in the habit of giving you opportunity without the power to handle it? Now, I'm not going to tell you that God's never going to put you in a situation that you can't handle, because I really just don't feel like that's accurate. But if he's going to put you in the situation, he will give you the ability to handle it. And it may be far beyond what you think you're capable of, or what you are capable of. But you can do it if he's going to help. If he brings you to the place, he'll provide the way for you to cross it. He brought the Israelites to the Red Sea. They can't cross it, but they can if he helps. These are examples that are set for us. And he may bring you to a place where he has to open the way. If he's going to do that, who are you to stand back and refuse it? In some ways, you might say that here is an opportunity where you are supposed to say, Jesus is the Christ. And yet if you deny to say that to them, is Jesus going to deny for you later? I won't go that far, but some might. And it's worth thinking about. He wants me to tell people about the power of Christ to save. How can I constantly not do that? Here we're asked, ask for a way to do it. I'm uncomfortable with it. That's one of the things Moses said as well. That's okay. He's going to help you. Consider that getting an opportunity is God giving you a nod of approval. If you're not adequate for something, you're not going to get asked to do it. If you're going to be put through a trial or a temptation, then God knows that you are adequate to deal with that. And wherever you may feel you're not strong enough, he will empower. But consider you are not powerful enough to fight God's plan. If he's giving you opportunities, if he's constantly having these set before you, these open doors, you're not strong enough to shut them. Walk through it. Tell somebody. Get egg on your face one good time. You know what hurts more than anything else is whenever you make some dumb statement that you really shouldn't make, and someone goes, "Aren't you a Christian?" And you go, because you know it hurt, and you know they're right, and you know that whatever opportunity you were going to have to teach them about Christ, are they going to listen to you anymore? You're going to have a difficult time with that. There's no reason that they can't still obey the gospel, even because of you, or in spite of that opportunity. But you'll never forget that that was a place where you were cut to the quick, pierced to the heart, where you were shown, hey, here's a place I need to work on me so that I can help God bring others to Christ. Your example matters. The next verse in Colossians 4, walk in wisdom toward outsiders, making the best use of your time. And that's one good reason why, because you don't want to look like not a Christian in front of other people. Number one, it's not effective for salvation. Number two, it makes you question your own salvation, and maybe with good reason. But if I'm walking in wisdom toward outsiders, if they know of my faith, if they know of my concern for my salvation, if they see its importance to me, it's going to help. What's a good illustration for that? If you walked out those doors and you saw everyone running from here to there, how many of you would consider running that way? Whatever it is concerning enough that these people are running, and people just don't do that anymore. And they're running in that direction, so whatever is over there is probably not something I really want to run toward. We love those people, those first responders, those military personnel who run toward the places where people run away. If you meet someone and you're telling them about God and you're showing them this flood of importance to you, these so many reasons why my worship, my God, my relationship, my salvation, these so many reasons why I care. Here's a flood pointing them toward where you're trying to get them to go. Pulmonologists shouldn't smoke. Lung doctors, they shouldn't smoke. Why? Well, because it damages your lungs. And this is a guy whose job in life is to fix bad lungs or problems with lungs. And he's tearing his up. Does that mean that he doesn't know anything about medicine? No. But I don't want him to be my pulmonologist. He has some loss of conviction somewhere. Mechanics shouldn't have busted down vehicles. I don't want to take my car to them if they don't know how to change a tire. Christians should not remain in their sin. Because why should I care about your salvation if you don't? Your example matters. People should take notice that there's something different in your life. And one of the ways that starts is that you choose your words well. You choose your non-words well. There were times when Jesus shut up, and that was his answer. Here's a woman caught in adultery. What's your answer? No answer. Stoops down, starts writing on the ground. There are times when the best answer you can give is you have a dumb hypothetical question, and I'm just not going to answer it. Can God create a rock so big that he can't lift it? Well, if he can't create it, then he's not all-powerful. And if he can create it, then he's not strong enough to pick it up. You know what? That's just a dumb question. What's that got to do with God caring about your salvation, which is everything he's revealed to us? I refuse to answer your hypothetical. What are you so cheerful about today? It's Sunday. That's not a place to be silent. The reason that you come together is to partake of the to partake of the Lord's Supper. What is partaking of the Lord's Supper? Proclaiming the death of Christ. And if you can't give them a reason why you're happy on Sunday, then you can come in here and have a snack. But if you're not going to walk out the door and tell them why, let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. Different people are going to need different answers. You can look at the end of Jude, how it discusses, for some people you should be very merciful, you should be very slow, you got to build them and you got to get them to a place, you got to move them along slowly. And for some of us, you need a rock over the head. Now, that's me. But you got to know who you can hit with the rock over the head. and who, if you hit them over the rock with the head, they'll never be back. In the meantime, and until you figure it out, your speech always ought to be gracious, seasoned with salt. Let your words be effective. Paul is asking for an opportunity to give salvation. And I ask you a question at the beginning of the message. What is God doing in your life? I'm not going to stand up here and pray that we all are given an open door, because that may not be where you're at right now in life. It may be a season in your life where you got to work on you. Does that mean you can't bring someone to salvation? No. But it may be that right now you need to work on you. But if you think that you're doing pretty good, I have less things to work on me about, less, not none, and I've been blessed, then perhaps that is the moment that you need to go home and ask for an opportunity to be more effective in bringing others to Christ. They need you. The church doesn't need them. We don't have to have a full building. And Jesus' power is not heightened or lessened because of your efforts. But they need you. They need you. Will they open the door and show you how? If you've reflected on your life this morning and you've seen so many places where you need the prayers of the saints, not for your health and for your travel, but for your physical well-being, maybe your steadfastness, maybe your failures or temptations, then we're ready to do that. If there's anything you need to fix between you and your God, make it known as we stand and sing.